Excellent. Welcome everybody and people who are watching this later. I work for Auckland Council. I'm a terrestrial ecologist by training, I guess you'd say, and I work in a research unit called RIMU. That's with a bunch of other scientists. So I'm terrestrial ecology, and I have a compatriot comrade, whatever you want to call him, colleague, who does terrestrial ecology, and there's also a couple of freshwater specialists, a couple of marine specialists, air quality scientists, things like that. And we do the state of the environment monitoring for the council. So we sit in the planning division, which is actually quite a small part of council. Council right at the top divides into planning, which has, I think it's a couple of hundred employees. And operations is the big division, which you deal mostly with the biodiversity people and things like that. It has many thousands of people in it. So we sit in planning, and my unit is responsible for just the state of the environment monitoring, basically. That's our main role. And then I also, over the last few years, have found myself more and more involved in just general biodiversity and environmental monitoring projects as well. But I guess you'd say our core business, if you think of it that way, is state of the environment monitoring. And with me, it's biodiversity. And I brought, just to give you an idea of the scope of the project, these big maps I brought along. That's the current biodiversity monitoring network that we've got across the Auckland region. And it's quite new. It only started a year before Auckland Council came together as an organisation, and it was an attempt by the then Auckland Regional Council to sort of commence landscape scale biodiversity monitoring, which hadn't really been done in New Zealand before. So the program's been going 10 years now. We're coming up, next year will be the start of some of the plots are on 10-year rotation, so it's the sort of first remeasure. So people do biodiversity monitoring, but it tended to be targeted in areas that they were interested in, like say the Waitakere Ranges or the Henuas or places like that. So this program was an attempt to get a representative sample across the whole region. So we're not just looking at regional parks and dock reserves and things like that. We're also putting in monitoring on little pockets of little remnants of forest on people's farms, and the remnants of forest in urban settings and that kind of thing. So the idea is that the blue dots are wetland plots, the green dots are forest ones, and we go to these locations and collect quantitative data on biodiversity. So and generally it's been vegetation stuff, birds and pests, and the vegetation kind of takes care of the plant pests, and we do the animal pests with chew cards and things like that. We don't do insects. We've had a go at insects in small little locations, but what am I trying to say? It's scratching the surface in terms of biodiversity reporting, but we figure if the plants and the birds are doing okay, then everything else will follow. You can see from looking at that map that there are some parts of the region with really good replication, with much higher replication. So as well as the kind of across the region representative samples, there was we also went for places where there was a lot of biodiversity management going on. So that would be places like, if you look on there, you can see Tawhanui, Shakespeare, Ark in the Park, the Kokako Management Area and the Henua Ranges. They all have clusters of plots associated with them as well. And out on Great Barrier, there's two areas that would be Glenfern and Windy Hill. So the methodology is consistent. We're doing the same types of things in all these places. It's just the replication in those areas. Well, the theory is that it allows us to look at what's going on just in Tawhanui or just in Glenfern and compare that with how forest or wetlands or whatever might be doing generally across the whole region. So that's the idea around that. on that big map that I've sent around, I think you'll also see some yellow dots as well along the coast. Are they in there now? Yeah, so that's I've always been aware that dunes or coastal monitoring was sort of like the missing. We were doing forest, which of course would have been the dominant ecosystem across the Auckland region, probably 95% of the land cover, pre-human. So we're doing them. Wetlands are really important. Again, are probably the next most dominant ecosystem, and really, really important for, those sort of environmental ecosystem services type stuff, the kidneys of, that kind of thing. So we're doing wetlands, but we recognised there was a gap there with dunes, or coastal ecosystems and dunes, and something we just started in the last couple of years is dune land monitoring as well. So we've got these 3 programs, and now we're monitoring biodiversity consistently in all these locations. And you talked about 5 or 10 years worth of data. I think this is really, we've got our eye on the long term here. We're really talking 20 or 30 years to, I think, for these programs to really begin to, for you to get 2 or 3 or 4 data points in terms of measuring change and stuff like that. So, but it's just great to have the project up and running basically, and it's particularly the I guess where we were riding the crest of a wave in terms of what Auckland Council was doing. Some other regional councils have picked this up now. So places like Greater Wellington, you'd see similar types of monitoring, and the Waikato in terms of the forests. What we're doing is quite unusual for the wetlands. I'm not aware of another program that is as comprehensive and gets into all the, the agricultural landscape and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. Even internationally, there aren't really good examples of that. So that's the sort of big picture stuff. Those blue dots you see on the big map, the idea is they get remeasured every 5 years. Yes, I can see myself there. And the green dots, which are the forest plots. Now the original plan was to remeasure them every 5 years as well. Our program got a bit of a funding cut maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and one of the decisions we decided to make was to switch to a 10-year rotation on the forest plots. John and I could probably have a conversation about this. I don't know how useful I think in some forest ecosystems you might be wanting to go every 5 years, but before I did this job I actually did a lot of plot measuring myself. These are the methodologies, incidentally, a national standard 20 by 20s which have been put this is for the forests. They've been maybe the 1960s or so they developed those, didn't they? So it's a pretty national standard methodology, and all the other councils and DOC use it as well. But if you see the damage that 4 people do in a 400 square metre space, because they're 20 by 20s, where they're there for 6 hours, I do wonder at particularly, maybe not in every, but particularly on steep slopes where the terrain is a little bit the ground isn't so stable and stuff like that. And I've never seen any good research, John, on the impact of measuring a plot actually has on, it's like the old Schrödinger's cat or whatever, isn't it? I just wonder, particularly on that steep country, how big a impact measuring the thing is having on the results. Anyway, sorry, I'm charging off down. What's that?
Data on what was there.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, you think seedlings and saplings being the forest of the future in these kind of situations, it's quite incredible the damage that can be done to saplings, on a slope like that and people have been skidding around on the understory. Anyway, that was partially some of the justification for going to a 10-year rotation, and the fact that in really mature forest, 10 years seems like 5 years is almost within the measurement era of people doing a diameter thing on a tree. Anyway, so the upshot of all that is we have these 2 programs running. The dunes and the wetlands will be on a 5-year rotation, and the the forests are mostly on a 10-year rotation. Now, in terms of barrier, if you just maybe flick to this one now, so.
Can I just ask, is there any tidal zone surveying going on?
With the wetland program, we push down into what are called salt marsh and brackish wetlands, but we're not pushing out into mangroves or anything like that. We do have a completely separate marine monitoring program, which I don't know a lot about, but it does cover large parts of the region. It's not as representative as this, but the cool thing about this was it was started and we put all the sites in. The marine monitoring tends to have accumulated more ad hoc over time. So what they haven't done is looked at the whole region and said, right, we're going to do 50 locations and let's spread these around. It is a bit more like what the old biodiversity was monitoring was like. We're interested in this area, so we'll go in and do some monitoring here, which is great to tell you something about that place. But then you haven't necessarily got a representative sample across the whole region when you pull that data in from 10 or 15 different locations. So,
who's the person or persons in RIMU?
So Megan Carbines is the current marine person. There's normally two there. Megan and Jared were people for a long time. We've just had a bit of staff churn lately. So I can certainly send you all the information relating to what we do out here in terms of marine and freshwater monitoring and things like that as well. In fact, that's a task I'll give myself, I guess, go away and report back to Rent about that.
Interested in it.
Yeah. Do you use the biodiversity staff out here to do some of the monitoring, or do you do it all yourself?
No, we tend to do it ourselves. So we have used locals out here before as part of our field teams. But because most of our work happens on the mainland, and to keep that sort of consistency of work, we tend to send a team out here for like a couple of weeks or whatever. In fact, we were just out here for the wetlands recently. But just looking at this one in front of you now, this is sort of the idea with Aotea, Great Barrier, is that we would have enough replicates of our plots to look at the forest biodiversity across the whole island, and those are the green dots that you see on there. So they're forest plots across the island. In practical terms, to be honest, we're not really doing the whole island because working for council, with all the health and safety implications and things like that, these sites are randomly, so we popped the grid down and sampled on the grid, and then to pick the extra pots we randomly sampled. You can see a lot of those dots are in the centre of grids, so we sort of randomly picked grids out to go and put a plot in. A few of the coastal ones came out as random kind of selections, and that was involving people going on boats, jumping off boats, it would just, in an ideal world, we would include that kind of stuff, but it would just suck out such immense amounts of our budget to be able to do those. So if you if you look on the next couple of pages, and where I've put that big purple line around the grid arrangement that you can see there, that's kind of like the sample frame, if you like, our sample frame for barrier. So we've left out a few of the outlying islands and the really hard kind of country around the margins. So I guess the largest part of the island is included in that. But I just if I'm really being upfront about what we're covering, we can't really do those marginal ones without really getting into it. So
drone technology?
Not yet. Drones are kind of more. That's probably more for survey work and things like that, I'd say. The work that the guys do is identifying plants, measuring them, counting seedlings and saplings, doing bird counts, that kind of stuff you can't really do with drones at the moment. Drones is great for survey work, and one thing we need to get better knowledge of out here is the ecosystem pattern, and where it, you know, with the new regional ecosystem system that we've got, where about 48 ecosystem types and variants were identified for the Auckland region, and we're in the process of mapping them across the whole region. It was actually done for the unitary plan, but that work needs to be developed more. So yeah, drones are great, but they don't really do the job of this kind of monitoring yet.
You need them to identify plants.
That's right.
Plant app you can get on your phone.
And you could, and again, forest types maybe. So kauri, for instance, we're getting we need a really accurate map of the kauri distribution in Auckland for the dieback kind of monitoring work that's going on. So they're using drones and aerial photos for that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this kind of biodiversity monitoring, there's no substitute for getting a person out in the field. I'd say the thing that we're closest to getting that automated thing for would be birds, because you can put bird recorders out in the field, and rather than having a 5-minute bird count, you know, once every 5 years or something like that, you've got this, you know, you've got a bird recorder out there, you're taking a record over a week or a month or whatever. The problem with that currently is the processing the information. You just get squillions and squillions of data, and the software hasn't caught up with the ability to take those calls, you know, whack them into a computer and it'll tell you, you know, that was a blackbird, that was a bellbird, that was a kaka, that kind of thing. So until that comes along, we're still stuck with the manual method there. But that's certainly, I'd say, the area that shows the most promise in terms of that's all more automated recording. Yeah.
Right, yeah. They're doing water sampling with the drones at the beaches in Auckland.
Rather than having a person hanging out of a helicopter. Yeah. So that kind of makes sense. Yeah. So that's the forest plot network anyway, those green dots. And then we also put in the much smaller grids that you can see, those red ones, a whole bunch of plots in at Glenfern and in at Windy Hill. And this was all done sort of about the same time. So all these plots are due to be remeasured starting not this year but next year. So we're into the 10-year remeasures this year, but we didn't start on Great Barrier till the second year of our program. So whatever year that was, I guess it must have been 2010. So most of these are due for remeasure 2020 onwards. And there is no money to remeasure Glenfern and Windy Hill at the moment, that when I talked about the budget cuts earlier, but I'm hoping it's actually not that much. There's a lot of money sloshing around at the moment, which I guess we'll get to in a minute. And I can't see any reason. We'd be working hard just to get, you know, $15,000 or $20,000 or whatever the extra cost is to do those. So, and if there was one of the things you were mentioning earlier and you'd like to talk about is that sharing information community, you know, that link back to the community. At the moment, this data just sits, you know, in a database. We use it for our report cards and in the state of the environment reporting, but it doesn't get used beyond that. But if there are things that you think that would be helpful or that would help with reporting back to the community and stuff like that, then it's, you know, it's all there. You can have the information yourselves, or you can ask us for, you know, we want a report on X, Y, Z, and, you know, have to fit it in with other work priorities, of course, but we're able to do that kind of stuff. So, so that's the sort of forest work, which was the main focus out on Great Barrier. If you just flick to that, last page now, that one there. We also have the wetland program, which I talked about, and you can see all the dots on the map. And there aren't very many dots on Great Barrier for that program. I think there are only 2. actual wetland plots on the island. How many blue dots are there down there?
Oh, down there.
Yeah.
About 15.
Heaps of them. Okay, right. So there's two. I think there are only two plots that sort of go up into the regional wetland reporting, but we also have focused on another couple of wetlands out here because they were really big and important. So one of them was Kaitoki swamp, which isn't actually a swamp, it's a mire, I think.
Back here,
Yeah. Even though it's called Kaitoki swamp, that's fine. It's not quite fertile enough to be a swamp, you see. So that's actually the biggest wetland in New Zealand, in Auckland. If you don't count Whatapu, which is just kind of a mix of duneland and wetland. And so I had some excess budget maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and I got someone to put a plot network in there. So I think we've got 16 plots through Kaitoki, again replicating what we do on the regional scale, which is a replication of a national system for monitoring wetlands as well. So that data is just sitting there ready to, those plots are sitting there ready to, there's no budget to remeasure them, but they're there, and again, if the need arises or if the money arises, whatever, we would have an intention to go back and do them. Just out here, after the burn, we put a whole bunch of plots in as well, just to look at change in fire, change with the fire succession. So again, that's 12 or so wetland plots, I think. They just got remeasured like in March. The guys came out here and redid them. So that would be, if you'd want us to write that up, that's the kind of thing. That's a specific issue in a specific place that's quite interesting. Okay, it's about how the native vegetation is recovering after fire. So that's that data's there and available now to do. The Duneland program, which I was talking to you about, our intention with that is to monitor with plots 2 locations out on barrier, so that would be the Whangapoa Duneland system and the Claris one, which I was just having a bit of a poke around in this morning. So that would be plot-based monitoring in those 2 Dunelands, and more what we could call condition monitoring. So that's someone going in, doing a vegetation map, and then making a whole lot of assessments about what they're looking at, and scoring it using a semi-quantitative kind of a scale. How bad are the weeds, how bad are the pests, that kind of stuff. How bad is the erosion from people walking over the dunes. We were hoping to do those, one of those ones that looks like Awana there, does it? And Medlands. So, and that data will tell us something about those individual locations, but it's also grouping up, with the sites, similar type of monitoring across the region for a regional kind of picture. And the other circle that you'll see on that map is they call that Arid Island, or Rakitu, is it? Yeah. So I'm a little bit less involved in this because it's just someone who works for us who's been out there, but my understanding is that we are going to put in some monitoring out there just to look at changes since the poison drop, basically, how the forest understory and things like that are responding. So I don't 100% know. Cameron's been out there and he's tried out a few different methodologies and things like that that we sort of discussed before he went out there. So I don't know exactly how we're going to do it. It won't be with forest plots though, because we don't have that much time, and we're more interested in the seedlings and saplings, and we want to sort of take the work that you do in that small area and diffuse it out a bit more across the whole island. So, but that's something that we're really hoping to make happen.
Have you got data from Rakitu from before the drop?
No. Well, effectively it's before the drop. If we get in there quick enough, I guess it'll be a spring now. But the idea was that we would have had it done by now, which is effectively before the drop, because there's been so little time. So I guess that's a potted summary. Gosh, it's taken me a while, hasn't it? I've been talking for 25 minutes, I can see there. That's what we're doing over the region, and then shifting that and as part of that regional work, what we're doing on Aotea, Great Barrier Island. What we do know about Aotea is, it's got a quarter of New Zealand's flowering plants. It's, missing a bunch of, it's a fantastic place for biodiversity and to live, I'm sure. And I'm not speaking as a council employee here, just, my personal, we would be, if our long goal is, if our long-term goal is preserving global and New Zealand biodiversity, we would be concentrating a lot more of our budget out here. If that's my personal perspective. That's people have place-based interest in things, and there's a lot of beautiful sites on the mainland. But for New Zealand, when you look at New Zealand and pest-free New Zealand and things like that, you see Stewart Island and Great Aotea really stick out to me in terms of places where if you did go with full pest removal, there's just there's so much left. There's so much area out here. It's so diverse in terms of the ecosystems that are here. A whole bunch of things aren't here already. So what am I trying to say? I would like to see more of a focus on biodiversity monitoring out here, maybe than there has been. But I think with the NETA, that's the Natural Environment Targeted Rate money that came in the that's not in my area of council exactly, because that's over in operations, but that's given a real kickstart to this type of stuff. And within the organisation, there's a bunch of us that are working to sort of push a lot of that money, as much of that money as we can, as is practical out in this direction. And you've probably seen a bit of that already. But just, and I guess that's that's going on to what should we know, I guess. I mean, I've presented to you what we're currently doing out here. Is that enough? I don't know. It fits in with the kind of framework that we're using for state of the environment reporting, but there may be issues specifically for you guys that maybe there's something we could do more out here. But I'd like to know what that is. I mean, there's been a couple of discussions about birds, and I've heard of the kaka count, for instance, and someone else was talking about bird counts before over here. Do you want a representative bird sampling across the island or something like that, rather than just in Windy Hill and just in Glenfern and just in these other places where you're doing it? I guess then we go to reptiles and all sorts of things. Are there specific projects around animals, maybe rabbits, I've heard are a problem in the dune lands, like outcome monitoring, that kind of stuff. So I'm also involved in that for specific locations. They tend to be urban, like pest-free Kaipatiki. I live in the Kaipatiki local board, or the Eastern Bay Songbird project. Those are other things that we're involved in RIMU in terms of outcome monitoring for those projects. So that not just outcome monitoring in terms of how many things we've killed and how much poison's been taken and stuff like that, but actual biodiversity outcome monitoring. Are there more birds around? Are there more saplings in the seeding of saplings in the forest? That kind of stuff. So, what should we know? I don't know. We know what RIMU's currently doing out here at the moment is sufficient for our statutory sort of state of the environment reporting, but maybe we need to do more. I don't know. The department will also be doing monitoring out here as well, so they have a very similar national scale plot network now, very similar to what we're doing. That's the Department of Conservation. The main difference being they use an 8x8 kilometre grid, whereas our regional one is on a 4x4 or 2x2. So I'm guessing they only have about 2 or 3 plots out on Great Barrier anyway. But if we maybe we're in a position now, if we get Doc and the council and the community in a room together, we could come up with something that was more, we could effectively beef up the replication out here, or move into, do more intensive monitoring around issues that the community was really interested in. I'm running out of, I think I'm at the end of my spiel. Yeah.